Kosovo has the lowest minimum wage in the Balkans, and one of the lowest in all of Europe. Standing at €130 a month for workers under the age of 35, and €170 for those above, Kosovo's minimum wage is far behind its neighbors, and is only a fraction of the wages in Western European countries. But Kosovo's minimum wage hasn't always lagged so far behind. When it was set in 2011, it was in line with those of its neighbors. While other countries have increased their minimum wages, Kosovo's has remained stubbornly flat. First, let's take a look at what a minimum wage is and why it's so important. As its name implies, the minimum wage is the lowest amount an employer is legally allowed to pay their workers. Today they are a global norm. 90% of countries have one. But as many things we take for granted, such as weekends or the 8-hour workday, minimum wage laws were the result of hard-fought battles by unions and labor activists, fighting sweatshop conditions and labor exploitation. The first minimum wage was passed in New Zealand in 1894. They later became standard throughout the 20th century. Today the debate isn't about whether to have one or not, but where to draw the line. In general, a higher minimum wage disproportionately helps younger, marginalized, and lower-skilled workers, the people who are most likely to work at or near the minimum wage. At the same time, a minimum wage that is set too high can increase labor costs too much, increasing unemployment among the very category of people the minimum wage laws are meant to protect. Business interests, predictably, favor low minimum wages so they can pay workers less and keep business expenses down. A minimum wage that is set too low will make labor exploitation and poverty worse. In Kosovo, the Social Economic Council, composed of representatives of workers, employers, and state institutions, is supposed to review the economic situation every year and propose a new minimum wage to the government. For years it never happened. When the council began, it was tasked with implementing a narrow technical review. If certain economic data failed to meet a preset threshold, the council was not allowed to propose a new minimum wage. Reforms in 2017 freed the council from these rigid guidelines. Proposals to increase the minimum wage followed. Despite near-unanimous agreement from politicians that the minimum wage needs to be increased, no government has accepted the council's wage hike proposals. Had these proposals been accepted, many workers' wages would have doubled, radically boosting living standards for Kosovo's working poor. But it isn't just Kosovo's government that decides. According to Agron Demi of the Gap Institute, the International Monetary Fund exerts extensive pressure on Kosovo's government not to raise the minimum wage. Part of the concern is budgetary. Some social schemes, such as the war veterans' pensions, are linked to the minimum wage. If the minimum was increased to the level proposed by the Council, the expenses for war veterans' pensions would be tens of millions of euros higher each year than the current 77 million. The IMF also claims that Kosovo's current minimum is already too high in relation to the average wage, and that increasing it would lead to unemployment. Few publicly agree with this position. While workers waited for government action, the minimum wage wasn't just staying the same. Due to inflation, its value was decreasing. Though the euro, Kosovo's currency of choice, has a low inflation rate, over 10 years it can add up. For example, on average, something that cost €1 in 2011 would cost €1.11 in 2021. That means that Kosovo's minimum wage, while nominally remaining the same €130, has actually lost around 10% of its value since 2011. At the same time, average salaries in Kosovo have been increasing faster than inflation, a good thing for Kosovo's workers. But higher salaries can lead to higher costs. Just think about how the average price of a macchiato has risen over the past decade from 50 cents to around €1. As salaries and prices have increased, workers on the minimum are falling farther behind. In 2011, the average household spent around €7,000 per year. By 2017, that number was almost €800 higher. A two-income household on the minimum wage would earn less than half of what the average household spends in a year. Promises to raise the minimum wage are a constant feature in campaign platforms. Every major party made the issue a prominent part of their 2021 election statements. Abdullah Hoti, then acting prime minister and LDK's candidate in the elections, promised in February that the minimum wage will be €300 regardless of age. PDK's top candidate Enver Hoxha said the same thing, declaring, "The minimum wage will be €300. We are set on that." On Workers' Day, Prime Minister Kurti reiterated his party's electoral pledge, posting on his Facebook page that We will raise the minimum wage initially to €250, exempting it from taxes, and we will reevaluate it in the future so that it reflects the increase in national wealth. Recently, Minister of Finance Hekuram Murati, who also has labor in his portfolio, reiterated this commitment, but did not provide a specific time frame. Kosovo 2.0's repeated requests for comment were ignored by his ministry and the office of the Prime Minister. While government after government has dragged their feet, and electoral promises to raise the minimum wage went unfulfilled, workers have continued to fall farther behind.